Why don't politicians ever play cricket? Because whenever they get near a catch, they drop it. Nothing like a bit of political humour to lighten the mood. Now that we've shared a chuckle, let's get down to business. Today, we're embarking on an enlightening journey through the labyrinth of modern politics. Our mission, should we choose to accept it, is to dissect, discuss, and perhaps even debunk some of the 12 most controversial topics in the current political climate. From the climate change conundrum to the race debate, we've got it all covered in this 22-minute rollercoaster ride of satire and facts. We'll be poking fun at the absurdities, highlighting the ironies, and hopefully leaving you with a few more laughs and a lot more understanding. We promise it's going to be more entertaining than a parliamentary debate. Now let's dive into the world of politics without a life jacket, shall we? First up, the hot topic, quite literally, climate change. The wild world of weather, where things are heating up both literally and metaphorically. Climate change, dear friends, has become the proverbial hot potato in the room, and no one seems to know whether to toss it, bake it, or bury it in the sand. Now, let's get one thing straight. The Earth has been around for a good 4.5 billion years, give or take a few millennia, and it's seen more dramatic shifts than a soap opera. Ice ages, warm periods, and that awkward phase when dinosaurs roamed around in their birthday suits. But the speed at which things are heating up now, well, that's got scientists more flustered than a polar bear in a sauna. Enter the climate change skeptics. You know, the ones who believe that the world is simply going through a hot flash, and it will all be over in a jiffy. These are the folks who look at rising sea levels and say, well, at least we'll have more beachfront property. Then there are the industrialists, the ones who treat the Earth like a giant piggy bank, breaking it open for a quick buck. They argue that progress and profit are worth a few degrees of heat. After all, who needs a polar ice cap when you've got air conditioning, right? But what about the role of government? The ever-present question, should they regulate emissions, promote renewable energy, and educate the public? Or should they just provide everyone with a complimentary pair of flip-flops and a beach umbrella? In the end, the real question is not whether the Earth is getting warmer, it's what we're going to do about it. Are we going to bury our heads in the sand, or are we going to face the heat and do something about it? So, is the world getting hotter, or are we just getting hotter under the collar about climate change? Next on the list, we have immigration, the great divider. Now there's a word that's been known to kick off a lively debate or two. Immigration, ladies and gentlemen, isn't just about packing your bags and moving to greener pastures, oh no. It's about the lines we draw, quite literally, on maps and in our minds. Let's start with border control. Now, some argue that strong borders are key to ensuring national security. They're like the bouncers at a club, deciding who's allowed in and who needs to take a hike. Others, however, see it differently. They argue that borders are just imaginary lines and that the Earth belongs to all of us. It's a bit like arguing over who gets the last biscuit at tea time, isn't it? Then there's the economic impact. On one side, you have those who believe immigrants add value to the economy, like a surprise bonus track on your favorite album. They fill roles, pay taxes, and drive innovation. On the flip side, there are those who worry that immigrants might take jobs away from locals, a bit like a new band stealing the limelight from your favorite old rock group. Finally, let's talk about cultural assimilation. Here, the debate gets as heated as a curry from Birmingham. Some folks see the blending of cultures as a beautiful mosaic, a testament to human unity and diversity. Others, however, fear a loss of cultural identity, like a full English breakfast being replaced by a continental one. In the end, the immigration debate is about more than just policies and politics. It's about our values, our fears, and our dreams. So the next time you find yourself in the middle of an immigration debate, remember it's not just about who we let in, but also about who we are and who we want to be. As you can see, immigration is a lot more than just crossing borders. It's about crossing lines, moving on to our digital overlords, the tech tyrants. In the 21st century, we've all been willingly seduced by the siren call of technology. Our lives are now entwined with a handful of tech behemoths who, quite frankly, know us better than we know ourselves. And I'm not just talking about your most embarrassing late-night Google searches. These tech giants, or as I like to call them, the tech tyrants, have a stranglehold on our personal information. Every click, every swipe, every hashtag is a breadcrumb, leading straight back to our digital doorsteps. The question isn't whether they're watching, but what they're doing with all that data, selling it, using it to manipulate us. Perhaps they're just hoarding it like some sort of digital dragon sitting atop a mountain of ones and zeros. Then there's the wealth. The tech tyrants are amassing fortunes that would make Croesus blush. They're the New Age Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the Vanderbilts. And where is this money going? Into the pockets of a select few. They're not just taking a slice of the pie, they're eating it whole and leaving us with the crumbs. And let's not forget their influence. These companies aren't just shaping our online experiences, they're shaping our societies, our cultures, and our politics. They're the puppet masters, pulling the strings behind the scenes, shaping public discourse and opinion. And all this without a vote, without a say. But it's not all doom and gloom. These tech giants have brought us closer together, made the world a smaller place, and sparked innovation at a rate that's breathtaking. They've given us platforms, voices, and the tools to create, innovate, and connect. So here's the million-dollar question, or should I say the trillion-dollar question. Are we living in a digital utopia where everyone has a voice, or a dystopia governed by the tech tyrants? It's a question that's more vital now than ever as we continue to navigate this brave new digital world. So, are we living in a digital utopia or a dystopia governed by the tech tyrants? Now let's tackle the ever-confusing world of healthcare. Healthcare, the hot potato of modern politics, is a bit like trying to assemble flat-pack furniture without instructions. It's complicated, it's frustrating, and it's absolutely essential. One of the main controversies around healthcare is, of course, affordability. Should your bank balance dictate the quality of your health? It's a bit like going to a restaurant and being served a different dish depending on the size of your wallet. Then there's the question of access. In an ideal world, we would all have a medical clinic at the end of our street, but the reality is far from it. Some people live hundreds of miles away from the nearest doctor. It's like being in a desert, but instead of water, you're searching for a stethoscope. Quality of care is another bone of contention. We've all heard horror stories about patients being misdiagnosed or receiving subpar treatment. It's like going to a 5-star hotel, only to find a cockroach in your bed. It's not what you signed up for, is it? And let's not forget the pharmaceutical companies. They're a bit like the big bad wolf of healthcare. They make the drugs we need to survive, yet their prices can be astronomical. It's like going to a car dealership and being asked to pay £1 million for a second-hand Mini Cooper. It's just not cricket. But perhaps the biggest controversy of all is whether healthcare is a commodity or a right. Should it be something we buy and sell, like a loaf of bread? Or should it be a basic human right, like freedom of speech? It's a debate that has politicians and the public alike scratching their heads. In essence, healthcare is a labyrinth of issues, each more complex than the last. It's a puzzle that needs solving, but no one seems to have all the pieces. It's a bit like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube in the dark. Healthcare, a commodity, a right, or just a headache? Next, we have the trigger-happy topic of gun control. A debate that's been shooting off sparks for decades, and it seems we're still stuck in a revolving door. On one hand, you've got the folks championing the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. They argue that it's a fundamental freedom, as American as apple pie and baseball. Their mantra? Guns don't kill people, people kill people. It's a catchy phrase, sure, but it's worth noting that it's considerably harder to kill someone with a baseball than a semi-automatic rifle. Then there's the other side, who believe we're not in the Wild West anymore. They argue that with great power comes great responsibility, and perhaps it's time to rethink the accessibility of firearms. They point to the alarming number of gun-related deaths and injuries every year and ask, isn't it time we did something about this? And let's not forget the elephant in the room, the National Rifle Association. This influential group is seen by some as the defender of individual liberties, and by others as a roadblock to reform. Their lobbying power is no secret, and they've been known to take aim at any politician who dares to challenge their interpretation of the Second Amendment. So who's right? Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The debate rages on, with both sides locked in a stalemate, each convinced of their own righteousness. And while they argue, the clock keeps ticking and the body count keeps rising. But let's not leave on such a somber note. Here's a bit of trivia to lighten the mood. Did you know that there are more guns than people in the United States? Now there's a fun fact to drop at your next dinner party. Gun control, a safety measure, or a liberty infringement? That's for you to decide. But one thing's for sure, this debate is far from over. Moving on to the ABCs and 123S of the education equation. Education, that cornerstone of civilized society, or so they say. But delve a bit deeper, and you'll find a Pandora's box of controversy. Let's take funding, for instance. It's like a complex algebra problem that nobody can seem to solve. On one hand, we've got public schools that are often underfunded and understaffed. On the other, private institutions with resources aplenty, but accessible only to those who can afford the steep price tag. Is it fair? Well, that's a matter of perspective. Then there's the standardization debate. Some argue that uniform curricula ensure all students are on an equal footing. Others contend that it stifles creativity and individuality, turning our future leaders, innovators, and artists into little more than test-taking automatons. It's a bit like asking if you'd prefer your sandwich cut into rectangles or triangles. The bread, cheese, and ham are the same, but the presentation makes a world of difference. And let's not forget the unsung heroes of this saga, the teachers. Tasked with shaping young minds, they're often caught in the crossfire of budget cuts, policy changes, and societal expectations. Some say they're underpaid and overworked. Others claim they're not held accountable enough. It's like asking a juggler to keep more and more balls in the air while simultaneously reducing the time they have to catch each one. So, where do we go from here? Is the answer more funding, less standardization, better teacher support, or perhaps a complete overhaul of the system? It's a question as complex as the education equation itself. Education, the great leveler, or just another system of inequality? That, my friends, is a question worth pondering. Next up, the rich get richer and the poor get the wealth gap. Now, who doesn't enjoy a good game of Monopoly, right? The satisfaction of owning all the railroads, hotels on Mayfair, and watching your friends go bankrupt. But in the real world, this game is a bit less fun, especially if you're always landing on go to jail. Let's talk about wealth inequality, a hot topic that's been simmering in the political crockpot for quite some time. Some see it as the spice of life, the cayenne pepper of capitalism, if you will. They argue that the wealthy have earned their fortunes through hard work, risk-taking, and a dash of ingenuity. But there's another side to this coin, or should we say, banknote. Critics argue that the system is as balanced as a seesaw, with an elephant on one end and a mouse on the other. They claim that the rich are hoarding wealth like squirrels hoard acorns, leaving the rest of us to fight over the crumbs. Let's take a look at tax policies. Some argue that taxing the rich more heavily could bridge the wealth gap. But then again, there are those who say that this would discourage entrepreneurship and stifle economic growth. It's a bit like trying to decide whether to have your cake or eat it. Then there's wage stagnation, the ugly stepchild of the wealth gap. While the cost of living has been doing a steady uphill climb, wages seem to have developed a fear of heights. The result? More people struggling to make ends meet, and the wealth gap yawning wider than a hippo with a toothache. And let's not forget about social mobility, or the lack thereof. The American dream has always been about the opportunity to climb the economic ladder. But these days, it seems like the ladder is covered in grease. So, is wealth just the result of hard work, or is the system rigged? Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or should we say the billion-dollar question? Now let's talk about the battle of the sexes, the gender gap. The gender gap is an issue that has been a hot potato for decades. It's like a tricky maze where every turn leads to another, more complex issue. On one hand, we have the wage gap, where, on average, women earn 79% of what men make for the same work. It's like ordering a full English breakfast and getting just the beans and toast. You're left wondering, where's the rest of it? Then, we have representation. Just like a game of musical chairs, where the music stops and you're left standing because there are not enough chairs for everyone. In the world of politics, business, and other sectors, despite making up more than half the population, women are often left standing without a chair when it comes to leadership positions. The societal norms are the unwritten rules that dictate what's appropriate for different genders. It's as if we're part of a grand play, with roles assigned not based on our abilities or desires, but simply because of the chromosomes we were dealt. It's like being told you can only play the triangle in an orchestra because you're left-handed. Absurd, isn't it? But here's the kicker, folks. There are some who argue these gaps aren't as wide as they're made out to be, that they're myths perpetuated by misinterpreted data. It's like being in a room where everyone sees different shades of color. One says it's blue, another swears it's green, and someone else insists it's teal. Who's right? The gender gap is an intricate puzzle, a mix of undeniable truths, misinterpretations, and areas that need further research. It's a debate that requires open minds, empathy, and a willingness to understand diverse perspectives. Gender gap, a myth, a reality, or a bit of both? It's a question that continues to stir up controversy and spark heated discussions. And until we can all agree on the color of the room, it's a question that will remain unanswered. Next, we delve into the complex world of the race debate. Now, if you thought the controversy around climate change was heated, buckle up, because we're about to tackle the ever-evolving, often contentious and always complex issue of race. It's one of those topics that is as old as time itself, yet it remains as relevant and divisive today as it was hundreds of years ago. Let's start with systemic racism, a term that's been tossed about quite a bit lately. It refers to the systems, policies, and practices entrenched in our societies that perpetuate racial inequality. It's like a nasty weed in your garden that just keeps popping up, no matter how many times you think you've yanked it out. The frustrating thing about systemic racism is its invisibility cloak. It's often subtle, hidden in the very fabric of our institutions and cultures, making it difficult to pinpoint and eradicate. Moving on to representation, or rather, the lack thereof. It's the year 2024, and we're still struggling with representation in everything from politics to pop culture. It's a bit like trying to put together a puzzle with half the pieces missing. You can't get the full picture unless everyone is included. Then there's affirmative action, a policy designed to level the playing field. It's like giving a head start in a race to someone who's been forced to wear lead boots. But as with any policy, it's not without its critics. Some argue it's reverse discrimination, while others say it's essential for rectifying historical injustices. It's a bit like trying to untangle a ball of yarn that's been battered around by a dozen cats. Messy, to say the least. In conclusion, the race debate is a complex one, filled with nuances and contradictions. It's a conversation that needs to continue, with empathy, understanding, and action at its heart. Race, does it define us, divide us, or both? Now we step into the rainbow of the LGBTQ+ rights rumble. The LGBTQ+ rights debate is one that's been rumbling on like a never-ending drum roll. It's a vibrant kaleidoscope of issues, from marriage equality to transgender rights, each as diverse as the rainbow flag itself. Marriage equality, a concept so simple yet so controversial, has been a roller coaster ride across the globe. One moment, it's a lovely wedding in Amsterdam. The next, it's a heated debate in a courtroom halfway around the world. Then there's the question of transgender rights. Imagine waking up every day feeling like you're in the wrong skin. That's a reality for many. Yet, society often struggles to understand, let alone accept. Bathrooms, sports, military, you name it, the controversy is there. And societal acceptance, well, that's the biggie. It's like asking a cat to love a dog or vice versa. It's possible, but it's going to take some work. LGBTQ+ rights, a journey of acceptance or a fight for basic rights. Finally, we explore the divine and divisive topic of religion. Strap in, folks. We're treading on holy ground. Religion, it's a bit like Marmite. You either love it or you hate it. It's a cornerstone of many societies, providing moral guidance and a sense of belonging. But it's also a hotbed of controversy, sparking debates faster than a vicar can say amen. Let's begin with religious freedom. The freedom to worship as you please or not at all. Sounds simple, right? Well, not quite. From the hijab ban in France to religious symbols in public spaces, the line between freedom and offense is as thin as a communion wafer. Then there's secularism, the separation of church and state. While it aims to ensure equal treatment for all, it often stirs up a theological tempest in a teapot. And we can't forget extremism, the dark underbelly of faith. A small but loud minority twisting religion for their own agendas, causing rifts as wide as the Red Sea. Religion a source of unity or a cause of division. Well, we've navigated through the political minefield and lived to tell the tale. We've braved the climate change conundrum, grappled with the Great Divide, and dodged the tech tyrants. We've survived the healthcare hoopla, escaped the gun control gridlock, and solved the education equation. We've bridged the wealth gap, closed the gender gap, and navigated the race debate. We've celebrated the LGBTQ+ rights rumble and crossed the religion rift. Each topic, a hotbed of controversy, a whirlwind of opinions, a battlefield of ideologies. But remember, these discussions, as heated as they may be, are the bedrock of a functioning democracy. They are the sparks that ignite change, the catalysts for progress. We may not always agree, but we must always discuss, debate, and seek to understand. Remember, in politics, as in life, the only certainty is uncertainty. Until next time, keep questioning, keep debating, and keep laughing.